Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Fit Lawyer Pod. I am your host, Fit Lawyer Julia. And for today's guest, I actually just met her maybe like a week or two ago. I met her through Momo Muscle, or AKA Momo O'Hare, who was on a previous episode. So you guys have not listened to that, you should go listen to it because Mo and I had such a great conversation. And since that conversation, we hung out a couple more times before her big move out to Tokyo. And during one of those hangouts, I had the privilege and the honor of meeting our next guest. And our next guest has a very unique story, both as a diabetic and as an adoptee. We will go into a deep dive into both of those topics. What life is like as a diabetic for her, what she needs to do to keep that in check, when she was diagnosed, how she was diagnosed, and everything she's done since. We, of course, will get into her career, as well as what it was like or what it is like being an adoptee. I don't have too many adopted friends. I have a few, and everybody's stories is a little bit different. But I'm so excited for you guys to listen to our conversation. It was so educating because despite diabetes being one of the most prevalent diseases in the US as well as worldwide, I think, don't quote me on that. Um, we actually know very, very little of it. And by we, I mean me. So I really enjoyed our conversation and I learned so much about her. And I'm just in so much awe and admiration of her, of everything she's done, everything she's doing. And just it was just so educational. And for anybody that knows me knows that I love learning. So without further ado, I always say that. Without further ado, here is Danica the Diabetic. Well, hi, Danica. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this the day before Thanksgiving. And I know you had a super busy day today. This
Yes,
is your second pot of the day, right?
it is my second pod. So I'm excited to be here. Really excited to talk with you.
Nice. Likewise. And I know we briefly touched on it, but you had an eye injury and you had to go to the eye doctor optometrist today. So
Yeah.
how's that healing? How's your eye doing?
I think my eyes might still be dilated. Having my lights
Oh
on right now
shit.
is like, oh, like
Oh,
it's kind of funny. But my eye is healed from my injury, and now I just have some
okay,
weird
good.
like sinus piece of it, and it was just inflammation from my injury. And then they're like, oh, there's a lot of stuff coming into town from this, and everyone's sinuses are up. So like that's why you're having these insane headaches. I was like, okay.
Oh, so they're saying that your sinus is both because of the impact to your eye as well as just like allergy season or
Yeah,
something in
they
the
said
air?
it's probably because my after my injury, I didn't have any problems for a week and then just came
Right.
back. So they're like, your eye's pretty much healed. There's just a little bit inflamed still in the back, but it's right near the whole area. So
Oh
it's like
shit.
the inflammation of your sinuses and this are just oddly interacting together, but it's mostly your sinuses because my eye like checked out from all the tests.
Oh, well, that sounds super fun right before the holidays.
I know.
Yeah, so what do you got planned for tomorrow for Thanksgiving?
Tomorrow for Thanksgiving, I am doing like a Thanksgiving yoga and a
Oh,
turkey
fun.
trot. So those are just trying to get some movement before I go and eat. But then I have a couple of different Friendsgivings, and
Nice.
then I'm going to a movie later.
Fun. And you're relatively new to San Diego, right? So how long have you been here?
I have been here almost a year. I got my place in November, but I didn't really move until January. So it's my
Okay.
first Thanksgiving in San Diego.
Yay. Well, it'll be fun.
Yeah,
Well,
I hope
welcome to
so.
San Diego and happy unofficial 1 year anniversary.
Thanks so
Anniversary to your
much.
lease, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we met not too long ago through our mutual friend Mo, who was on the pod before. We recorded an episode as well, and we literally met like last week, I want to say.
I
But
know.
I don't know about you, but I felt like it was just like an immediate connection, like the chemistry was right. And we just kind of hit it off from there.
No, right on. Like I was like, did we really just meet a week ago? I feel like I've known you for like years.
I know. And you know what I was telling Mo is like, because she's moving and we've been hanging out a lot. And I was just like, how is it that like my best dates from like the last 2 3 months have all been girl dates, and I've met a number of new men and a number of new women such as yourself, and I just cannot connect with these new guys like the way I've been like we connected, as well as like another friend of a friend that I met at dinner the other day. Like we've been texting every like pretty much every day since we met. But yeah, the vibes was just right.
Ac Absolutely, definitely the vibes, and I kinda can echo that. It's like I've met some really, like, empowering women the past couple months, and I'm like,
Yes.
"This is exactly where I wanna be, and these are the connections I wanna have in my life." So it's just been
Yes.
pretty awesome.
Yes, and speaking of empowering women, that's exactly how I felt about you when I met you. I know you mentioned you travel a lot for work and that you are a hospital consultant. So, can you explain a little bit of what that is and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do performance improvement consulting and really around spend management and operational efficiency for health systems all across the US. So that lets me travel across the US just depending on my clients. But I'll do projects, I'll do standalone things, but I'll lead a project or I'll be a subject matter expert in a certain area like digital health or patient care services or really anything, any purchase service I'll look at, but I really work closely with the C-suite and then make sure that everything is implemented.
And what is a C-suite?
C-suite is really your CFO, your COO, and your CEO.
Oh, the C-suite, so the top dogs.
Yeah, the top dogs of
Okay.
the health system are really my bosses when I'm on when I'm working with them.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting because, you know, I'm an attorney, and law kind of like medicine, people don't always think doesn't always click that it's also a business, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, there's the aspect of counseling people on legal aspects or taking care of patients, but at the end of the day, it's all a business. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you work more on the business side of medicine versus
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, so like the healthcare administration, the business side, I help bridge that gap between some of the clinical and the business. But at the end of
Okay.
the day, if you're not operating, if you don't have the right systems in place, things aren't going to go appropriately. And I actually work with legal a lot because I look at contracts, I look at vendors, so making sure those relationships are there. But there's quite a few legal teams on my own team at work, and I work with the hospital's legal. So yeah, I get to read a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I bet you do, because medical malpractice is such a um like a big area of law, and these are not little cases, right? These are not small claim courts or like med mal cases are big cases, and a lot of them are class action, because if it's a big hospital and something's wrong with the bed or one batch of medicine, that's a very large class action. So do you do more preventative work or like cleaning up after their shit, I guess?
It's more preventative, and when it comes to the legal side of it, I can even see if they even have a legal team or a legal third party. Sometimes I might take it out to bid, so they're doing an RFP or a request for proposal from different firms to make sure that they have these different cases because it just depends on what legal services, if it's in-house or if it's outsourced.
Okay, nice. And how did you get into this? Because it sounds pretty niche.
It is very niche, and I didn't even know it existed until I got into it. Long story short, I reconnected with one of my like high school basketball dads. I played basketball forever, and there was just a big close group of us that played year round, and we like everyone's dad was like a basketball dad. But in my adult life, I was traveling and ran into him at the airport, and he's just like, "Wait, you're like you work in hospitals, you work in healthcare in your business, and you're a scientist? Like, have you ever thought about doing this consulting work or doing something else?" And like then I really got intrigued in understanding this whole other world of like healthcare administration and seeing how consultants can come in, seeing how you can impact a community in a completely different way.
Yeah. So, what is your background then? What were you doing before this?
Yes. So before this, I really wanted to be a dentist. And I was in the process of applying to schools. I was working for the American Dental Association and I was working for the Ad Council with a big dental campaign before I started on the straight hospital side. But before that, I had worked as a nursing assistant, a dental assistant. I went to grad school literally in a hospital and I'd worked at a VA. So, like, coming to the straight healthcare side and the hospital side wasn't a big jump for me. It was just something I hadn't really looked at from that lens. But I was full time in dental, like dental business, dental education before I went back into more of the operation side.
Okay. You said you did your master's at a hospital.
Yes.
Can you
So
elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, so I got my master's in biotechnology at Rush University. So it really is like the science behind medicine. That's the best way for me to describe it. But we did different rotations through most departments of the hospital. And I also learned how the different labs supported those divisions. So we even had a veterinarian clinic. So I got to work on like sheep and see their testing as well. But I got to do different rotations. I got to work with different residents and beyond, but it was a very hands-on experience and we were right in class with med school students and PAs.
Nice.
Yeah.
PAs are physician's
Physician's
assistants.
assistants,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Nice. And how long have you been doing hospital consulting?
I've been doing hospital consulting for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's longer than I thought. I
I
guess it's
know.
just
I
because like I know we talked about our ages, but I think it's still kind of shocking to me because you look so young to me. But I know I get that a lot too when I tell people I've been practicing law for 7 years, you know?
Yeah, no one believes. I got carded the other day with a bunch of oh, with you.
Yes. You know, Mo and I were talking about that. We sat down first and they didn't card us when we ordered our drink. And then you came, he carded you, and Mo and I just kind of looked at each other like, this fool really did not
Exa-
card us, but carded her.
I know. I was like, okay,
I was
like
like, what
I got
happened to Asia No Raisin? The fuck? The fuck?
I know.
So
That was
offensive.
that was a foul. Very foul play.
Yeah. And so on social media, you are D- Danica the Diabetic, which flows so well. Um, so still, I guess, how do I want to say this? When were you first diagnosed with diabetes?
Yes, so diabetes, that's a big part of my life. I was
Yeah,
diagnosed at 14. I was in 8th grade and a hot mess. Well, at that time I didn't think it was a hot mess, but I was just like, what? My life was just given the biggest curveball that I did not want to deal with.
yeah. So how did that diagnose come? Did you feel weird and went to the hospital or
I ended up in the hospital. It was not my plan, but I had gotten injured in a basketball game because my life was just basketball, friends, and like eating at that time. But I had hurt my ankle and went to the doctor. They put me on crutches for a week, and I went back to get like my clearance to play in the tournament that I had that weekend. And my ankle was cleared, but they were like, "You lost 12 pounds in a week." And then they talked to my mom and they were like, "Has she been
oh wow.
thirsty or going to the bathroom more?" And she's like, "I heard her like go to the bathroom once or twice in the other night, but they
Did
checked."
you? Sorry,
Oh,
did you know you lost 12 pounds in a week?
no, I was already like stick. I was a stick, and like I probably didn't have 12 pounds to lose, but I didn't
Yeah.
even notice.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think the crazy thing is they checked my blood sugar and it was in the 700s. And like I was
Okay.
Gucci.
So I have no idea what that means, what a healthy blood sugar level should be. So can you go back to basics and kind of just break that down a little
Yes.
bit on like a healthy person versus
Uh,
well, I shouldn't say healthy like that, but
yes.
you know what I mean, a non-diabetic versus a diabetic.
So a diabetic, your range should be what they want you to be in is 70 to 120. And a non-diabetic, it's like 60 to 100 is pretty just normal. But 70 to 120 is what I aim for like every day. It's not always
Okay.
there, but being in the 700s, most people are in a coma at
Oh,
that point.
shit.
Yeah.
And so how do they measure that? How do they measure the sugar or the blood glucose level? That's what it's called, right?
So what they do, they can do a finger stick or they check it in your urine and
Okay.
they see your blood glucose level. And then they also will do something called an A1C test, which is your accumulative test of your blood sugars over a period of time. So your A1C, a normal person's is like a 5 or
Okay.
and mine, oh gosh, it's so hard to get there. But some diabetics sit at 12, some sit at a 7, just depends on where you're at. But they did all these tests, and at the time I was like, you got all this from my blood? What?
Yeah.
I'm fine. Like, and I didn't understand it. I remember like that poor doctor, because this was like my pediatrician too. I was like, I don't have time for cancer. I have a basketball game. And
Right.
she was like, "Oh, Danica, like you don't have cancer, you have diabetes." And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but it can wait until after my basketball game.
It can wait. Diabetes can wait. I have game. I have a game right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty normal and standard for a teenager, for someone in the eighth grade.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I know there's a couple different types of diabetes too. Like, so what kind of diabetes do you have, and what are the differences between those diabetes?
Yes. So I have type 1 diabetes, and it used to be called juvenile, but you can get type 1 at any age. But type 1, your pancreas is dead. It's not producing insulin. It might produce a little bit, but not enough to keep your body operating. So it's the most severe version. Then there is type 2. And type 2 is when your body can't keep up with the amount of insulin that it needs to make. So that's why some people can take a pill or they can reverse it just by healthy lifestyle choices and exercise. But then there's so many other types. There's gestational, which is the one you can get when you're pregnant. There's type 1.5, where your body's still making some, but not enough. So it's a mix between type 1 and type 2. There's
Okay.
LADA, which is late onset diabetes. I don't know what the A stands for, but that one can happen like later and you're more type 1. And there's MADI. I don't remember what that acronym means as well, but there's like a total of 6 types, which
Oh,
is
wow.
crazy to think about.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize there were that many types. I just heard of type 1 or juvenile because, sometimes people are born with that, or it
Mhm.
does occur in children. And then, type 2, which I've learned, or which I, before this, had the understanding that it was, more for adults. And then the gestational that, sometimes women would get it in pregnancy and stuff. So as someone who has type 1 diabetes and you've been living with this since, you were in the eighth grade, how has that affected your life? Both from being a student athlete as well as, as an adult, because I know there's like what food and alcohol and certain things that you have to be careful about, right?
Yes, yes. So diabetes, like I was a pretty responsible and like independent child, but I had to grow up pretty quickly, pretty quick. Like it was like a lifeline. Like I had to start wearing an insulin pump. I had to give myself medication. And if I wasn't giving my medication, like I couldn't function. I could easily get sick. I could easily like kind of die. If you give yourself too much insulin, you can end up in the hospital. If you give yourself not enough, you can end up in the hospital. So it was a science. So I didn't have like the room for error like a lot of other teenagers did. I thankfully had parents because like there was times where like I forgot to put on my insulin pump or like I didn't bring extra insulin or I left it in a hotel or something like that where like my parents kind of were the responsible ones when those things happened. But managing that and like being an athlete was super, super hard because back then the tech wasn't nearly as great as it is now. I didn't have a monitor telling me my
Right.
glucose levels every 3 minutes. So when I played basketball, my blood sugar would always be super high. I'd be sitting in the 400s, which is
Oh,
way
wow.
above the range of 70 to 120.
Right.
And I'm highly functioning. I still can function very well with super high blood sugar. A lot of people would be in the hospital at those levels, but it became a big piece of like my team and my community. Like if I was a timeout in a game, someone was always like pricking my finger, seeing where my blood sugar levels were. It was either like our trainer or like my mom or another player, like somebody, I don't even know. But the consequence of that is I would drop super low in the middle of the night. And it got to the point where my dad would just get up at 3 in the morning every night and check my blood sugar, even if I was asleep. Because there was
Okay.
times like my mom was throwing down in the kitchen in the middle of the night because I needed a fuel meal because I couldn't keep my blood sugar up.
Wow. Okay. So what causes these spikes and these huge drops? Because 700 is high, right?
Yeah.
And then you say you would sometimes your blood sugar level will plummet while you're sleeping, and then you have to eat a whole meal. So what causes, if your body isn't making, I guess we could we could go back. What
Yeah.
exactly is insulin and what does it do for diabetics?
So insulin is a hormone, actually, if you think of it that way. So it is easily put through there, but it helps break down your carbs, the food that you eat, breaks down sugars. So you need it for your body to like really just operate. And then on top of that, it's like I have to give myself insulin so that my body can go through the appropriate channels of digesting food and providing energy. But
Okay.
there are a million things that could impact your blood sugar. And when you don't have your own regulatory system as a pancreas, it's all just you're relying on what you're putting on your body. What's up with science? So if I'm super stressed out, my blood sugar can be higher or lower. If
Okay.
if all of a sudden, like, I don't know, if I'm on my period or I have a cold, it can change. It can all change. Or if I ate a really carby meal or I didn't eat
Okay.
enough. So there's over like probably 45 different factors that can impact your diabetes.
Oh shit.
And it's just a constant like proactive disease you have to be on to like manage it. It's one of those things. If you're just reactive, like you're just gonna feel like crap all the time.
So insulin, like you said, is a hormone that helps your body monitor and regulate its blood sugar level.
Yeah, so insulin really is a kickstart for your energy. So it breaks down the
Okay.
food that you eat and it breaks down other things coming into your body that you need for energy to operate.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and you said before you had the new technology that'll tell
Yeah.
you what your blood level sugar was. How did you know how much insulin to give yourself um, when you didn't know what your blood sugar level was?
Yeah. So before I had my continuous glucose monitor, I had to prick my finger. Just so you get out a little like needle, you stab yourself in the finger and you get a piece of blood and you put it on a test strip and it tells you your
Oh,
blood
okay.
sugar. And that's like, I had to do that like between 6 and like 12 times a day.
Oh
And
man.
I was awful at doing it. Um, but that's how I would know. And sometimes it's not as accurate as our continuous glucose monitors because your finger is monitoring blood, your continuous glucose monitor is monitoring fluid. And like the skin is a
Oh,
barrier,
okay.
so that is another issue. It kind of causes some deviation. So before that, it was just really like, hey, I know I'm going to eat this amount of carbs. And my insulin, how much insulin I needed per carb, like it's called an insulin to carb ratio, that changes all the time. It
Okay.
depends on because sometimes you could have insulin sensitivity where your body is like, hey, like, this amount of insulin's too much for me, and it can make you plummet. And
Oh,
sometimes then you'll have insulin resistance where it's not even working at your normal rate. So that's why you have to go to your doctor as much as possible. Like I go every 3 months to monitor and make these minor adjustments to keep your blood sugars at a healthy area, or at least aiming to be in the healthiest area. Because if you're sitting with too high of numbers for too long or too low of numbers for too long, it starts to hit your other organs. They start to act differently. And that's why you're susceptible to so many other issues.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah.
there's no cure per se for diabetes, right?
No, for type 1, there's no cure. For type 2, there's a lot more that you can do to help get out of the situation. But I don't know, sometimes type 2 is linked to so many other diseases. And
Right.
if those aren't under intact, you're still not going to like reverse your diabetes.
Okay. And then what about because type 1, like you said, it's the basically total failure of the pancreas, right? Is that why
Yes. Yeah.
there's basically nothing you can do to reverse it?
Yeah, your pancreas
Okay.
is not working. That thing is just like shut down, just floating in you. And then in, in type 2, your pancreas is there. It just can't keep up because your body is being pulled to do other things. And it could be
Okay.
because of weight or your blood pressure, all these other pieces that could go into it. So that's where it's just like pretty interesting.
Okay. And then how does alcohol uh
So,
affect it?
yeah, for every human, alcohol lowers your blood sugar. So that's
Okay.
why you should always like eat when you're drinking.
Okay.
But for diabetics, at least from my perspective, if you're drinking just straight liquor, it's completely different because that doesn't have sugar. But if you're getting a cocktail or something along those lines, the sugar impacts your blood sugar, but it also can
Oh.
raise and then lower you because of the alcohol. So you have to be very mindful and aware of how much you're drinking and what's actually in it, because
Oh.
lots of those times, like, I mean, half the time when you get a hangover, it's not because of the alcohol, it's because of the sugar you had. And
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. So break that down a little bit because I've never been one to get hangovers. And I remember I used to always say, like, oh, like, when people, I don't know about you, but I did
Yeah.
a lot of partying before my bodybuilding days. And people will always say, like, oh, I'm such a hangover. And then I used to say it too, just because I still woke up and sometimes I have a tummy ache or my body was just dehydrated. And then when I really learned what a hangover was and, people explaining it, I was like, oh, wait, no, 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 I've never had a hangover. I guess I was just super dehydrated. So what exactly is a hangover and what causes it?
I mean, a hangover is very multifaceted, but it does have something to do with the alcohol. But a lot of those times, those deep where you have the headaches, your body can't keep things down. It's because one, your body's rejecting, you're dehydrated, but it's also if it's full of sugar, your body can't keep up and process it because it's not the right sugar that's fueling your body to be productive. It's not having your fibers, it's not having the protein and nutrition. So if you're already deficient and all you have is liquid going in that causes your kidneys to do more work, that's what causes your hangovers.
Okay. So do you think I've never had like a serious or real hangover because I eat a lot and I always stay hydrated when I'm drinking. Because even in my party days, like I try to drink water as I'm drinking whatever else I'm drinking. And your girl loves to eat, so best believe I had
Hmm.
at least a couple meals before my partying.
Yeah, I always just my rule is, hey, let me eat with this so
Okay.
that I don't have a crash. And then also like I'm giving myself insulin, we call it a bolus for
Okay.
these things. So if you're eating and you're hydrating, your chances of a hangover are less because it's still fueling your body with the right nutrients for it to work appropriately. If you're only pumping alcohol and sugar into your body needs more than that to operate.
Okay. And, since you were diagnosed when you were eighth grade, I think that's, still a child. I don't know if your body
Yeah.
went through puberty or anything like that, but I mean, I guess, has your diabetes changed as you've gotten older, as you've grown into womanhood? Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
My
Okay.
diabetes changes like every week. It's it's one of those things like depending on how active I am, depending on how sedentary I am, like that all
Oh,
impacts my
wow.
diabetes. But yes, through puberty, through growth spurts, through environment changes, all of that impacts my diabetes. So I personally, for me to keep up with it and try to live as healthy as I can, I have to review my numbers and make
Okay.
constant minor adjustments to keep up with the amount of changes, because just because it worked one day doesn't mean it's going to work the next. Like I can
Okay.
eat the exact same thing at the exact same times on one day, and then the next day do it again, have completely different blood sugars.
Okay. And like you said, that's because there's so many factors to it, both
Well,
external, your own mentality, your stress level, and stuff like that, right?
and it's also, yeah, because it's a disease. There's no perfect remedy for fix, like there's no
Right.
cure. So it's like this is how you best manage it. But also
Right.
when you're doing your best, it still cannot work.
Okay. And is diabetes hereditary?
It was thought that juvenile was hereditary, which it still is. Like if your parents or someone in your family had type 1, you are still at a higher percentage of getting it. They do have testing now, or you can do that. But
Oh,
now there's research that's been finding that it's far more environmental as well.
okay.
Because there's a new statistic that 1 in 10 people in the US have some sort of diabetes. And
Okay.
that's crazy to think about. Um, 1 in 10, and there's more and more diagnosed. I think there's over 3 million people in the US with type 1 diabetes, maybe even more than that. But there's new statistics coming out all the time. It's diabetes month. I should know these off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a lot of people with it, and some people are being diagnosed in their 50s and 60s. Like
Oh, wow.
my friend's dad is in his 60s. She's had type 1 diabetes since she was 7, and her dad just got it.
And did he have the type 1 or type
He
2?
got type 1 at like
Okay.
63, like last week. It's
Oh,
crazy
wow.
because that's just very, very rare. But people
Okay.
are getting diagnosed at any age. It's not just kids anymore. And the reasoning isn't always hereditary anymore.
Okay. Do you know the cause or the reasoning behind your diabetes?
No, no idea. I
Okay.
had no family history. I was adopted, but there was nothing in my records that showed anything of it.
Okay.
And I kind of blamed it on my move. My parents laugh at this, but I lived in Florida until I was about like 12. And
Okay.
then I moved to Tennessee, and I was like, that had to be the environment. The water had to be different. Like that's what I always said as a kid. But yeah, it didn't make sense because people used to get diagnosed like in their first like 5 years of
Oh,
life.
wow. Okay.
That's what it was always told. But then more and more people were getting it older and older and older. And it wasn't just juvenile anymore.
Mhm. And just backtracking a little bit, you mentioned that you are adopted. So does anybody else in your family have diabetes at all?
No, I am the only one with diabetes
Okay.
of any type in my family. My mom likes to joke that we all got diabetes when I was diagnosed because everyone made a lot of lifestyle changes.
Right.
Yes,
Oh,
but
that's very sweet.
yeah,
That the family made the lifestyle change, and it wasn't just like, all right, here's your meal, and then the rest of the family's gonna eat like normal. I'm glad
yeah,
that it was like a family lifestyle change.
yep,
Um, and are you comfortable talking a little bit about your adoption? Because I think it's pretty interesting.
yeah, yeah. I am.
Because like we mentioned earlier, we've had dinner, we've gone out. So you're actually the middle child. So your parents had a biological child,
Hmm.
then they adopted you, and then they had another biological child. That's
Yes,
actually pretty uncommon, right?
yes, it's very uncommon. So I know my mom, I think they were trying to have a kid or something of those senses, and they had a couple miscarriages, but then someone told them about me, and next thing I know, like I'm adopted, I have a family. I was 3 months year old, so I 3 months, they saw me like pretty much when I was born, but
Yeah.
it takes a while to get through the home studies and paperwork and stuff to adopt a child. But yeah, so my brother and I are like 6.5 years apart, and then my sister and I are 9 years apart.
And
So
who's the older one? Who's
my
the older
brother,
sister? Okay, so
my
it's
brother,
brother, you, and the younger sister.
yes. So my
Okay.
siblings are like 14 years apart, which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy. But my sister is kind of like a miracle baby because my mom was on bed rest for like 7 months. I
Oh
remember I was
shit.
like, what? is this? I did
Yeah.
not sign up for this. I didn't like, where's my mom?
Right.
But looking now that I'm older, I understand it a lot more. I understand why she was on bed rest. I understand just like the complications and like the health risk.
Right.
But I also understand like, whoa, like that's a lot for a mom to go through. It's a lot for a family to go through. And me, like as a kid, I was just like, why is this new child doing this? Like, can't mom,
Yeah.
like you can get up, you'll be fine. But it wasn't like that. So we're really close, even though we're all spread out,
Yeah.
but we are all very different. No one else has diabetes. I've definitely been like the health child my entire life, from like allergies to like, I don't know, everything. My poor parents.
Okay.
Uh, but
And then were
yeah, go ahead.
you adopted domestically or abroad?
I was adopted domestically. So I had
Okay.
a closed adoption. I don't know anything about my birth parents outside
Oh,
of
wow.
like, I think my mom was like 6'2" or 6'3", and then my dad was like 6'5". So I really thought I was going to be like 6 foot, and it didn't happen. I was just hoping like I'd have a massive basketball career being like a 6 foot
Yeah.
girl, and it just didn't happen.
So your biological parents are 6'2" and
Yeah.
6'5".
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you are tall.
I am.
I mean,
I am tall. I'm 5'10", but I wanted to be like
yeah.
taller.
It's funny because it's really weird that I didn't outgrow my parents either, which is really really weird. My dad's 6 foot, my mom's 5'7", which
Oh,
is
wow.
super tall for like a Chinese lady, and
Yeah.
I only grew to be a puny 5'5". Um, I don't know what happened, but my mom keeps saying it's because I deprived myself of essential nutrients when I was growing up because I was a vegetarian from when I was about 10 to 18.
Oh, wow.
I was really big on this. Animals too cute to eat. So, being a 10-year-old, I literally just stopped eating meat cold turkey. Um, and I obviously didn't do it the right way. I kind of just stopped eating meat and called it a day. But,
Mhm.
and then when I got into college, it was one of those drunken nights. I'm pretty sure I had some chicken, which is why I always say chicken is the gateway meat, right? It
Yes.
started from chicken. And then the next thing, I was in Peru eating guinea pig and in
Oh,
Belgium eating
wow.
rabbit and, back in China eating pork brain and stuff. So
You went all in.
chicken is the gateway meat.
It is, it is.
Are you curious about your biological parents at all?
I am not, honestly, like,
Oh,
I
wow.
am very blessed. I have, like, the best adoptive parents. I just consider them my mom and dad. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know any other, but I don't know, a lot of my friends that I knew who were adopted, they kinda, like, some of them went crazy when they turned 18 because they were like, "I can
Oh.
go find my parents," and, like, one girl, like, cleared out her adoptive parents' bank accounts, gave them
Oh,
to her.
shit.
Yeah, she gave the money to, like, her biological parents and then never heard from them again. And I'm
Oh,
like,
shit.
I would never, like, wanna put my parents through that, but then here's the thing that people don't understand. When you're 18, yes, you can go find your birth parents, but your birth parents can come and find you at that time. And I just haven't had any desire. Like, I might have a twin out there. I know I don't, but it'd be cool
Right,
if I
right.
just randomly had a twin. But yeah, other than that, I have no desire. Like, I'm blessed with a great family and
Yeah.
I don't need anything else.
Wow. You have adopted parents who literally cleared out the bank account of the people who raised them for however many years to give it to the biological parents that they found who didn't want them, who then later ghosted their own biological kid. Am I following the story correctly?
So like an adopted kid
Right.
found their birth
Adoptee,
parent,
right? Birth
adoptee found their
parents.
birth parents, gave the birth parents money that was in her adopted parents' bank account.
Right.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, that definitely feels. But the crazy part is the biological parents, but then was like, okay, thanks, bye, and then just
Yeah,
that's that's wild and I think very heartbreaking for all parties involved. Like
yeah,
the adopted parents must, not only be like financially hurt, but it's like, dang, like we raised you, we loved you, and essentially you turned around and bit the hand that fed you. And then I'm sure the child, the adoptee, feels very rejected a second time.
yeah.
And then I guess Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That feels really crazy to me, but I'm very
And
glad to hear that,
yeah, and it's like
you're
that story, I was like, the only way I can make it make sense is like my parents are black, my birth parents, I mean, my adoptive parents. It's so hard to get it confused, but I've always had that same like racial environment, but
Oh.
I could see it being a different challenge if your parents don't look like you.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah.
which is crazy. I mean, I still think it's absurd, but that's the only way I can make it make sense. Like, yeah, you wanted people, you wanted this community, you wanted this network, you wanted
Yeah.
that safety, I guess, in some sense, but it's just that understanding. I don't know.
Wow. I didn't even think about like the ethnic and the racial factor into this. So then when did you know you were adopted?
I honestly don't remember not knowing.
Oh.
So, yeah, like my whole life, I feel like I've known, and I celebrate like my adoption day, which I
Oh, I
love.
love that.
Yeah, it's super fun. Like my adoption day and my diabetes anniversary are like the same week, and it's all like
Okay.
around MLK weekend, so it's just like a big like celebratory week for me.
Yeah. Wow. So your parents have always been very open and honest with you then, because that means you knew even as like a young child.
Yeah, I knew as a young child, like I just don't remember not knowing. I have no idea when they told me, but it had to be since I can have a memory, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a
Wow.
bad thing or anything. It's just something that's like, hey, like we picked you.
Yeah.
So I always throw that in my siblings' face. I was like, hey, I was chosen. You guys just happened.
That's so funny because I used to always tell my parents that like I didn't choose you, you chose me. And my mom one time threw it in my face. She's like, technically, I didn't fucking choose you either. You just happened. And I was like, oh, like, damn, you not wrong.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, wow. I think that's pretty interesting because the only other friend I have who is an adoptee, they had like this huge, not huge, but they had like this sit down conversation with her, and it was actually quite a traumatic experience because she was a teenager, and I don't even know how the conversation started. I think she also has some health issues, so I think that's when her parents told her like, hey, like you're adopted. And I think it was actually a pretty traumatizing experience for her because it just wasn't anything she expected, and then she dealt with kind of like an imposter syndrome, and as well as uh like the feeling of rejection, right? Like, why did my bio parents not want me, type thing. So I'm glad, like, it's something that you've always known, and it seems like your parents were always very transparent with you. There were no trauma caused from that. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
wow, very
that's hard.
interesting.
No trauma around it. It's something I always knew, and I just
Good.
kind of worked it to like my uniqueness. But it is one of those things that can be traumatizing. I think like if I
Yeah.
didn't know I was adopted, my parents just randomly told me like when I was a teenager, it's like
Yeah.
I trusted you guys with my life this long, and you've been lying to me. Like, what else have you been lying to me about?
Yeah. Wow. So you really have, I mean, no real memory of anything else besides your parents because you were adopted at 3 months old.
Yeah, I don't really. The crazy thing is, I was in like foster care, not like the system, like private foster care, I guess, in that
Yeah.
sense. I had like foster parents, but
Yeah.
the crazy thing is like they keep up with me and my family,
Oh, I
and
love
then
that.
and then I was randomly in Tennessee. I think this was like when I was in college when I lived there, and the social worker who did my adoption was at the church. Like I went to my parents' church and this lady was there. They had reconnected. And it's like because I was
Oh,
adopted in Florida, but like
yeah.
those are people there's only a few people that knew me like before my parents did.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's just kind of crazy how that all kind of comes in, but even my community back in Florida, like a lot of the adults in my life, they all knew of my adoption story. They knew about it all coming. So they were all there and a part of like getting a nursery together. And there's like baby coming. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a 9-month process. It wasn't like, hey, we're doing this. So a
Right.
lot of people have known about me like longer than, I don't know, anybody, which is kind of weird if you think about it.
Yeah. Do you know anything about your birth parents at all?
I just know they were tall, and I think they were like in their early 20s, which
Okay.
now that I'm like past my 20s, I'm like, oh gosh, like I can't imagine having a kid
Yeah.
like 22. But I think it was just they had to do what was the best decision for the kid and making sure that kid had the best chance for having a healthy and thriving life.
Yeah. And what advice would you have for adoptees who are having a hard time and struggling with that?
I think honestly for other adoptees is have some grace. You don't know the circumstances, but it doesn't change anything about you. I think it just adds more to your story, your uniqueness, and how you really grow into your power. And knowing that someone chose you and wanted you to be a part of their family, I think is the best compliment you could ever have in your life. Because most people are just born into it and they have to deal with it, like
Yeah.
good or bad. But someone wanted to nurture you, someone wanted to bring you home, someone really wanted a child in their life, and you came.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Danica. That is so beautiful. But yeah, I think, it really is all about perspective. Like you said, you can think of it as like, hey, like I was chosen, like these people had, love to give. Their cup ranneth over and they filled my cup. And, like you said, give grace and forgiving the birth parents if the adoptee does hold any grudges because like you said, we're both in our 30s and life is hard.
Yeah.
Um I don't know about you, but I definitely feel like a big difference from when I was in my 20s versus like in my 30s. And I can say in my 30s because I'm officially in it. Because at 30, you're still like on the edge, you're like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. But then when you're 30s, you're like, but when you're 31, by the time you're 31, you're like, all right,
Yeah.
third decade, I'm in it.
I know. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm in my 30s half the time, but like I'm in it. Like
Yeah.
the lifing piece of it, but like from the health and energy and like opportunities. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I feel 27. But
Yeah.
I'm not. But yeah,
Yeah.
like the older I get, the more perspective it gives me. And I mean, how commendable is it for someone to be like, I am not in a place to take care of a kid and I
Yeah.
want them to have a better chance.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or and you never know if it was like a traumatic thing that brought a kid in the world or not. So it's like, I don't know, when people get upset about it, I'm like, you have a roof over your head, you had someone that cared for
Yeah.
you. Like, this isn't about you. That
Yeah.
decision, the decision to give you up for a better chance was about something, is about your survival. And
Yeah.
you were able to survive because some people don't have those options, especially in other countries or places like that. So I don't know. My sympathy piece of it is very limited in some places because I've just met a lot of other adoptees, and it's just like, hey, like don't hold this anger at your parents. Like go to therapy, work this
Yeah.
out. Like you're blessed.
Yeah. I know you're very vocal and very active about your diabetes on Instagram. I mean, Danica the Diabetic. Are you um, very active? I don't want to say active as an adoptee, but do you have like a lot of adoptee friends, like
Um,
from a group, or just coincidentally?
just coincidentally, and like the
Oh, okay.
craziest thing is like two or no, one of my cousin Bryce was adopted too.
Okay.
And he's African American and his parents are African American. And
Okay.
until I got older, I didn't realize how like rare that was.
Yeah.
Um and I have a different, I guess, perspective. My mom was a social worker and she
Okay.
did adoptions when I was younger. So I got like full hands-on experience of like the other side of it, like working with
Oh.
birth moms and stuff like that because my mom did that. And
Oh, wow.
it was
Okay.
super interesting, but like my community around it, like I've met some parents of that were or people with type 1 who have adopted because they didn't want to pass on
Yeah.
diabetes or even the risk or chance of it happening, which has
Yeah.
been really unique to kind of see as well. But
Wow.
it just kind of happened where I'm like, hey, I'm adopted. And I used to even babysit like these these two kids are like my children, but they were adopted, and I used to babysit them as soon as like they came home. Um,
Oh,
and it's just kind of full circle how like adoption just comes back into my life.
yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Um, and how, I mean, has that ever kind of came up in a in a negative aspect in your life? Did you ever like, feel like, especially with having type 1 diabetes, did you ever feel like, oh, maybe if I knew my birth parents or if I could find them, get more closure and understanding about yourself and about this disease at all?
No, because like when you're adopted, you get like a medical record. And
Oh, okay.
at that time, they didn't have any family history or anyone with diabetes. And like diabetes, when I was diagnosed, it was still very like, it's hereditary, it's hereditary. I was like, there's no way this is her only hereditary. Like there's
Okay.
got to be something else. So it's like, that's when like my little scientist brain came on. I was like, this has to be like something to do with the environment, something to do
Yeah.
with the water. Like, it was just different, but I had never like no hostility towards my birth parents on this. I honestly think it has nothing to do with them. I think it's
Okay.
really how a lot of diseases are coming up into our world today are like planet tech, just some of the consequences of advancing that we're not
Yeah.
even sure of.
Interesting. Yeah, because my grandma had diabetes, but she had type 2 diabetes and she was on the bigger side. And even though it was type 2, there was still always that fear that it was going to be hereditary. I don't know
Hmm.
why. This was China many years ago. So, like, I think my
And
mom, like, growing up was always like, oh, you got to eat healthy or eat XYZ or don't eat XYZ. Because there was always that thought that even though she had type 2 diabetes, there was always that fear that it was going to be passed on because, like you said, it's not something that's quote unquote curable. Um,
yeah. And I mean, people like if you're coming from a family of type 2, like you can be susceptible to it as well. Because most of the time, like it's an obesity issue. Like a lot of that is linked.
yeah,
So it just depends, and it comes down to your lifestyle pieces of it, like in learning how to feel your body, learning how to take care of yourself in different ways. If it's just something that's been passed on from generation, and the food quality's changed, you might not know that food is impacting your body differently.
yeah, yeah. The food and water quality is so important, and that's like something I can't emphasize enough because one, not only is it like a major health thing, but I personally know that I feel like different when I eat whole foods, better foods. Because when I travel, I disrespect my macros a little bit. And sometimes I do feel it. I feel a little bit more tired, a little bit more lethargic, or just, I probably, or I may not be able to move as much weight in the gym or whatever. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. Just food and water quality is so important for overall health.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
but yeah, I don't want to keep you up or keep you for too long. And then so before we head out, what advice do you have for people who want to get into your career field?
I advice is find someone, network. I think how you get into these unique jobs is really by building your network. I
Okay.
didn't know this job even existed, and like there's so many other firms or so many other things that you can go to, but anything that you're interested in, there's some way, like everything, even if it's health, if it's pets, if it's ever, it's all a business. So
Yeah.
if you're business minded, you can find a job around something of those. There's probably a job out there. So if you're trying to get into the healthcare field, if you're into healthcare administration, if you're into diabetes, there's a ton of careers in diabetes outside of just being a doctor. Like you can be a health coach, you can be a diabetes educator, you can be a nurse, you can be, I don't know, and I like there's so many other things. You could be a lab tech that
Yeah.
does diabetes pieces of it. And the more I've even grown in my healthcare career, I'm seeing even more and more job opportunities just because I'm understanding how health systems works, how the clinics work, how even
Yeah.
funding for these things work. And as the tech comes, there's more jobs in some cases to monitor the tech.
Nice. Do you think a medical background helps though for your specific role?
I think it does, but honestly, it comes down to people. It's like, can you talk to people? Can you solve problems? Are you relatable?
Yeah.
Do you have compassion? Because I think that gets you so much further. A lot of my job is analytical because I do look at finances, I do look at contracts, I
Yeah.
do look at operations. But if you are just like a computer and you can't talk to anybody, what good are you? you know?
Yeah.
So you don't have to be medically, but you have to be open minded to understand how it operates because no hospital that I walk into is the same. It could be in the same
Okay.
health system and it could be completely different, and you just have to be mindful of those type of things and saying like every situation is different. Every numbers don't tell you everything. Go and see. And that's really the interpersonal skills, I think, that come into the bigger play.
Nice. Wow, that's so beautifully said. But I absolutely agree with you because so much of what you said also resonates and translates into the legal field as well. I mean, of course, to be an attorney, you have to go to law school and you have to pass the bar. But
Hmm.
like you said, there's still so many other roles in the legal field that you can do without going to law school and passing the bar. And like you said, it's just about whether that's something you want, whether you have that drive and just learn it, pick it up, network. Because in any industry, um, there's
Yeah,
more than one role and one job position that is in that industry. And
absolutely.
last but not least, where can the people find you, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere on all social platforms. I'm Danica the Diabetic. I have a YouTube, I have a Spotify like podcast as well. And then I'm also on LinkedIn as Danica Collins. That's my government name. And for my diabetes like lifestyle company, my website is dia-log.co. So it's called Dialogue, the Insulin for Your Soul, where I really just talk about having a holistic approach to living with diabetes.
Oh, awesome. So that
Yeah.
is kind of your teaching platform.
Yep, it's my teaching platform, it's my empowerment platform. It has everything from like if you need help tracking your health stuff, like here's an app, or if you want community, here's how to get community, or you want some cute swag, here's some swag. Because I
Well,
like to feel
I
good and
definitely
look
want some
good.
cute swag. So I will definitely check that out and get me some swag. And
Yes.
I will put all of that information in the description below. Um, but yeah, well, thank you so much for your time and your
Yeah.
honesty and your candor. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I learned even more about you and your background, and I'm in even more admiration of you. So
No. Thank you so much for having me. It's great being here. And I love just learning more about your journey and what you're doing too. And I like that you're creating a space to even talk about this.
thank you.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll see each other soon. Definitely gotta hang out before Mo heads out.
Yep. We got a couple days. Let's get it.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night,
All
girl.
right. You too. Bye.
Bye.